Everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric, our continuing series on the Sega Dreamcast, NAOMI, and Hikaru, and today we're taking a look at some of the Sega Hikaru games. Now the joke being is that I have purchased two Sega Hikaru boards in the last 2 years. Both of them have been shipped like absolute garbage, like the universe is taunting me, and they always come in broken, because these are very delicate boards. But the Hikaru was just an evolution of the Sega Dreamcast and NAOMI specs, so they all are in the same family, so it seemed appropriate to talk to you guys about the Hikaru games. Now they do emulate poorly. This video is mostly just for historical, talking about what the Dreamcast became, but some of the emulation errors are so hilarious, it's just going to be a fun time all around. But honestly, I'm still looking for a Hikaru board, but if you want to collect this stuff, you have to buy it locally. These things just do not ship. Even if people try, and unfortunately with me, they just seem to throw them in boxes, it never works. But talking about some of the games that we have on the system, first is Trix. This is one of those gigantic cabinets where it had a skateboard on the floor and you can control it. And this is probably the one that emulates the best out of all three. There really aren't too many graphical glitches. Sometimes things don't appear, like there is no skybox, and part of that preview screen isn't there. But as far as setting it up and controlling it, it is a quite good skateboard game. It's exactly what you would expect it to be. It is no Tony Hawk, but it's challenging, it's fun, and it just is a high score attack style game. You have different inputs you can assign to the analog stick, your turning, your grabs, and it actually feels pretty natural to be set up on a controller to emulate versus having that gigantic skateboard controller being on the ground with the cabinet. Now you could totally collect a board like this and you could set it up so that you could spoof analog controls. As opposed to the skateboard, it would be quite the project, but this wouldn't really be on my list of things to collect for. But basically what you're looking at is the Dreamcast and the NAOMI's bigger brother here, because it is a lot of the same chipset and a lot of the same silicon in Dreamcast, but it is so much more advanced with a little bit different GPU hardware. This is basically, if you want to compare it to something, is, you know, tape 4 Dreamcast together and you have something like Hikaru. It was definitely designed to do one thing, which is Fong shading. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, and it was a huge innovation when Sega came out with it, but the board was just so expensive they didn't really use it for much. But one of the games that I have played in arcades and is quite good is Brave Firefighters. This is going to be hilarious to watch because it's barely being held together via emulation. This is one of the games that I've purchased before and the board came in broken. But you'll see here that that woman just doesn't have a face and the firefighter is completely missing his torso. He is just floating in midair. And this is just hilarious to emulate because it does technically work and it works fine. It's running at full speed if it's not freezing, but people's faces are missing and it's going to get better from here, trust me. But if this is a genre, it is a light gun firefighting game. Granted, it's not using the same technology as a light gun, it's more like a Wiimote, but the entire point of this is like, it's House of the Dead if the zombies were fire. You'll see here as we get to the story, basically there's a hotel on fire and we follow the hose and it just disappears into the ground. No big deal, that's how hoses work, I'm sure of it. But you can see a lot of the effects that Hikaru was able to pull off. This fire looks extremely convincing for the year it came out, being 2000. I mean, Dreamcast couldn't do it this well, NAOMI couldn't do it this well, and this is a lot of where the Hikaru hardware went, was to make, you know, photorealistic shading and other things like that. But I have played this game from start to finish in an arcade, probably like 5 or 6 years ago. I actually saw a cabinet while traveling, and it is a really good game, and I would definitely collect this for Hikaru and set up a custom controller conversion if I could. But you'll see here, in a moment, it's going to get even funnier, and that's why I really wanted to show this off. It's kind of half a joke. There's supposed to be somebody standing there, and we're just talking to the air, and we're going to continue to rescue people that are invisible to the point where it seems more like an episode of The Three Stooges than it does actually talking about an arcade game. But this game had a ton of promise. You know, when it came out, it was really interesting, and it was showing, you know, one of the last Sega hardware platforms before they started just using the Xbox and then going to a PC design. But again, we just have firefighters whose torsos are missing. Maybe that's intentional. Maybe they're just fire Ghostbusters. Who knows? Obviously, it's not intentional. I'm trying to make a joke here. But it still does emulate well enough to be functional, and it is great that we can play these Hikaru games on a computer, even if they don't really work too well, because there's only 6 games on the platform, and I'm only showing you a handful of the ones that I care about here. I've done an episode on Planet Harriers in the past, and that's a board that I showed in the beginning that had the GPU just completely detached from the board itself. But these are games I do want to collect, and it's unfortunate that it is so delicate, but it is fun to watch somebody who's invisible fall from a balcony and only become a shadow once they hit the floor. And I think that was even the Wilhelm scream, a classic movie sound library scream that you get there. But now the firefighters are just missing their heads. They're just disappearing as time goes on. And I don't understand. I mean, obviously it's an error in the emulation, but for some reason it's actually more fun to play it this way in some strange way. Because you'll see here again, it's just somebody who doesn't exist. There's a shadow and the emulation's rendering the shadow fine, but the actual human being is not there. But the next clip is just pure comedy gold. I can't believe it happened. It is hilarious, and it's going to happen right now. This firefighter is going to rescue an invisible person, and they're just going to trot off the screen with their hand in the air. It's basically like they're a zombie. That is just gold. I'm so glad it happened. And then the game just froze. It does that constantly. These are not great games to emulate, but they're fun to talk about from a historical standpoint. And moving on to Star Wars Pod Racer, this is probably the most functional of all the games on Hikaru that you're going to try to emulate. This never once froze on me whatsoever. It just has minor graphical glitches. So clearly a lot of the emulation is clearly not final, and some games may employ certain aspects of the Hikaru hardware that other games don't, like Star Wars here, may just not be freezing because it's not using all of the different abilities of the silicon on the Hikaru board. But again, you'll just see that we're not getting a skybox on the stage, it's just one solid color. Now, it's really unfortunate that Hikaru is so delicate because these boards break just sitting there. You have to basically rework the entire thing to keep it alive. And what happened was the company that Sega hired to produce these boards forgot to tin the solder pads on the board itself before attaching CPUs and GPUs. They put solder balls on the chips themselves, but if you don't tin the pads, you don't get a very good solder joint, and over time they just crack. And that's why in the beginning you saw I was holding one of the processors for Hikaru in my hand. And you're just not really going to see these cabinets very often whatsoever because they are just extremely delicate. Now, if I get the chance to purchase one in Chicago and it's functional, I will definitely purchase it, and I will probably drive home avoiding all bumps because, I don't know, a pothole might pop a processor off these boards. But it's a really interesting piece of Sega history. I mean, it wasn't just the Dreamcast, it was the NAOMI, it was the Atomic Wave, it was the NAOMI 2, and it was the Hikaru. Sega was using, the Dreamcast, lineage all the way through in their hardware designs up through Hikaru. So it got a lot of use, and a lot of people don't realize that this is all part of the same, hardware library, the family of silicon. But you'll see here sometimes the water effects just don't work. It doesn't affect the gameplay, but it's just one of those things. I just wanted to show you guys some of the Hikaru games because it is an example of, more Sega arcade history and more Dreamcast history. I wish the emulation worked better. I doubt anybody's working on it because honestly it's just 6 games and they're all fun and great arcade games, but none of them are, beloved. I would say that if these boards are more popular, they might be more loved. Short of that, we really appreciate you guys for watching this. If you could do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell. We'll be back next Tuesday, another episode in our Dreamcast series. And when I end this video, I'm going to drop the audio out completely because even 3 seconds of Star Wars music in the background instantaneously throws up a copyright strike. Short of that, thanks so much for watching, guys. We hope you enjoyed this weird Hikaru video. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.